Hello everyone. I wanted to do a quick video to talk about expertization of 19th century classics. So, as of course all of you are probably aware, if you have any experience with stamps as collectors, you know that the 19th century is a very, very challenging time for stamp collecting because of the number of forgeries that exist on the market. Of most classic issues. Now, generally speaking, by the time you get to the 1880s, most of the forgeries have thinned out greatly. It's really the early classic period from 1840 up to about 1870 that's the real problem. There are a number of different forgers that had tried their hand at various issues. A lot of them are quite crude, a lot of them are easy to spot, but there's a number that aren't, that require you to have knowledge to be able to pick them out. And so, for this reason, a lot of this material has been depressed in the market. There's entire areas like Heligoland that routinely sell for very minimal prices. Roman States is another one, which I'm going to cover today. And all of the material has been blacklisted and painted with the forgery brush when that's not really necessary. And if you have access to the right resources, expertizing these items is actually not that difficult. And there are definitive tests in a lot of cases you can employ. The problem is you have to do a little bit of sleuthing online to find it. And whenever you do find it, you need to bookmark those websites so you can find them again. I always start, so there's a couple of places that I start in, but first I need to talk about Scott and the notes in Scott. So when you're looking in Scott Classic, a lot of times for a lot of countries, you will see notes that tell you that counterfeits or forgeries exist of particular issues. Sometimes they'll just say counterfeits exist, dangerous counterfeits exist. Other times they'll tell you and they'll give you characteristics to look for and some tests to employ to distinguish reprints and genuine stamps. The problem with Scott's notes is they're incomplete. So there are many countries that forgeries exist for that Scott doesn't even mention. They don't even tell you in the listings that there are forgeries. So that's a problem. The second thing is a lot of times with their tests, they're incomplete in the sense that the tests will ferret out the most obvious fakes, but just because you pass all the tests that are outlined in Scott doesn't mean that you have the genuine item. Because there's other tests a lot of times that need to be employed to be absolutely certain. Now, that's not always the case, but it is often the case. So Scott is not a reliable source for determining if a stamp is genuine or not at all. You need to go to other resources. Now, the first one that I use, and it's a book that's published in 1897, so it's 128 years old. But it's called Album Weeds, and it's by Reverend Erie. And in this book, if you look in the pages, you'll see it lists each country, and it gives you, it'll start off, it'll tell you here. So here's an example here, Cordoba, which is, I think, part of Colombia, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, it's Argentina, I think. So it will give you this issue here, and it will give you the description of the genuine stamp. And it goes into a lot of detail. Like it will talk about the spandrels, the lines, how aligned ornaments are in relation to other letters. Like it'll give you a very detailed description of the genuine stamp. Then it will give you the description of the forgeries. Okay, so in this case, there's a single forgery, but there are others here. So here's Finland, the first Copex stamps of Finland. It'll give you the genuine, forged, genuine, forged, reprints. It'll talk about reprints. In some instances, it will give you it'll give you first, second, third forgeries, fourth forgeries. It's an excellent book. I mean, generally speaking, if it's in Erie and your stamp matches the description of the genuine stamp, and it doesn't match any of the descriptions of the forgeries, then you can be generally sure that you have a genuine stamp, in all likelihood. It's not always 100% definitive. It doesn't list anything after 1897 in there, and there are some countries it doesn't have listings for. But it covers, this book here covers about 75% of what needs to be looked at. Now, it does not, interestingly, cover any of the Roman states material or any of the, it covers Neapolitan provinces, and that's what I used for the Neapolitan provinces stamps that are in the auction. But it doesn't cover any of the Roman states. Now, for the Neapolitan provinces, the very simple test, there were two tests actually, that I employed. The first was the number of dashed white dots around the frame. So on those designs, there are pairs of white dashes that are on the frame, and there are 24 dashes in pairs of 2 on the top and the bottom frame. There are 30 on the left and 28 on the right. And in the forgeries, those numbers are off. So that's one test that I employed, and in all cases, my stamps met the test. The other has to do with the number of vertical lines that are in each of the spandrels. Those are described in Erie. Erie does state that it's difficult to count them accurately, but they state that the genuine stamp will not have fewer than the number of lines he calls out. And when I counted them, they were all correct. So that was an easy test. Now, for Roman states, you have to look a little further afield. So another guide that exists, I don't have a copy of it to show you here. It's called the Serene Guide of 19th century forgeries. It's a much thinner book. It's about this thick. I haven't used one in about 25 years, but Serene was mostly for Europe. And it contained a little bit more information than Erie does on a lot of these issues. It had Roman states in there, if I remember correctly, so it was very useful for that. It had good sections for Heligoland as well. But the third thing I do, and this has worked for a lot of the material that's not in Erie, is I look online. So I'm going to turn the screen around and show you an example of a website that I used for this week. So there's this website here called Classic Stamp Forgeries, and its URL is stampforgeries@blogspot.com. And I found it by doing a simple Google search. So when I need to expertise an area, I might type in Expertizing Roman States. I might type in Expertizing Imperf 1852 Roman States issue, which is the issue I was looking at. Or I might type in Counterfeit versus Genuine Roman States. You have to play around with the terminology a little bit. Here, I'm just going to turn that light off to reduce the glare. You have to play around with the terminology, and you have to look at the first items above the fold on your results page. But generally speaking, if you're persistent, you'll usually find a blog or a website. Classic Stamp Forgeries is one. There's another one called Stamp Forgeries think it's called, let me just, yeah, stampforgeries.com, which is a WordPress site. That's got a lot of information. And then Big Blue, which is it's a private collector who does a lot of he does a lot of worldwide collecting up to 1940, and he goes through sometimes and gives little hints on the various issues. So this one here deals with this particular post. Like if you go down his archive, you can see what he's actually written about. You can also search it as well. But he's got a lot of classic stuff in here. Now, with the Roman states, if you scroll down, here he gives you the actual, here's the half Baji or Bajoko stamp. And you can see, I don't know how well you can see here, but he's got arrowed here 12 different characteristics of the genuine stamp. So he gives you a stamp here. He points out all these different characteristics, and then here he's got them all listed, genuine stamp. And he lists all 12 characteristics. Okay, then after he discusses the genuine stamp, okay, he gives you some forgeries. And he shows you some of the forgeries. And he shows you what it is about the forgeries that don't match up with the genuine. And, you know, so once you've looked at the overall genuine stamp and you compare it with the forgeries, I mean, you can generally see that none of the forgeries here are even close to what the genuine stamps look like. There are a couple, though, that are, this one here, the Zachmeyer forgery, is very, very close to the genuine. And in fact, I had 3 examples that I was all ready to lot in this week's auction that I was going to lot as genuine until I saw this Zachmeyer forgery and recognized that the closed loop here, this ornament here, matched what I had in my stamp, and so it told me that I had a Zachmeyer forgery. And the fact that the design was touching the pearls of the frame. Those are important characteristics, which if you were just looking at the stamps, you wouldn't catch. So then he goes, and there's the one badge, does the same thing. He's got 14 characteristics and discusses those. Here, okay, he shows you on this one that the dividing lines can be both broken and continuous for the different plates. Now, the dividing lines is a test that's reliably employed on the later 1868 issues, the imperf glazed paper and the perforated. But on this first issue from 1852, it's not a reliable test because the originals exist both ways. And he shows you that. He gives you some of the paper colors of the genuine, and then he gets into the forgeries again, which for that value are very obvious. Two Bajoko, he does the same thing, 13 characteristics, gives you a color variety, a genuine block. Those are genuine. Then he gives you the forgeries again. And so he does this for all the values in the set. And, you know, it's very extensive, very easy to follow, and generally speaking, very little danger of you misidentifying a forgery based off of his characteristics. Very unlikely if you're going through it and you have stamps that match the characteristics that you've got a forgery. Now, there might be some instances where, you know, if there's 13 characteristics, you've got 12 that match exactly, and one doesn't quite match up to what they said. That's not necessarily a cause to reject it as a forgery, okay? Because one of the things with these issues is the printing is quite rough. It's lithographic, it's stones. The inking's not always going to be perfect. So, you know, what they're looking for is a preponderance of those characteristics. and none of the characteristics of the known forgeries. Um, as you go through them and you see enough genuine stamps, um, which for this Roman States issue, there's a lot of stamps that don't catalog a lot of money. They don't they $9, $10, $20 a stamp. So there's no reason to think that they would be forgeries. And once you get an appreciation for those, and you get an appreciation for the paper and the ink and the appearance of the stamps, it's fairly easy to spot which ones are likely to be genuine and which ones are obvious fakes or reprints. Um, I was able to go through 3 stock sheets of Roman States fairly quickly in about an hour and identify the stamps that were clear reprints and clear forgeries, which was most of them, apart from the few genuine stamps that were actually buried in the lot, and which are in the auction this week. So, that's one example. Another one I'm going to do, I'll show you the Stamp Forgeries website here. So turning the screen. So Stamp Forgeries of the World. That's stampforgeries.com. It's a WordPress site. Okay, they give you a table of contents here. And they're fairly extensive. But again, they're not complete. Like, I couldn't find Roman States at all on Stamp Forgeries website. I had to go to the other Stamp Forgeries blog to find what I was looking for. But one of the advantages to forgeries.com is it's fairly up to date. And you'll find, there's things here like even, modern Commonwealth, like 1925 £1 native huts. There's forgeries of those stamps. And there's, Madame Joseph, fake postmarks on stamps, and other forgeries of high value, Commonwealth. And so there's modern stuff here, Japanese occupation of Malaya. There's different overprints that are faked. So it's a lot more extensive in terms of what it gives you from the 20th century. This one, I believe, Fiume was really well done on here. And Fiume is one of those areas that's really difficult. And the way they lay it out is they give you an issue, and then you can click on that issue, and it will give you the characteristics to look for and the basic tests. So it's very helpful for a lot of areas, but again, not everything. And you will have to look around for different websites. I know Heligoland, the best website I found was a very obscure, very old, clunky looking site that just happened to have the right definitive tests in it, to enable me to distinguish the originals from the reprints of the embossed Queen Victoria head stamps. It gave, UV colors under ultraviolet light, perforations, and information that just wasn't available anywhere else. So there you have it. That's an approach you can take to verifying the stamps that are in my auction. And anything you come across as you go through larger lots and you're going through auctions, don't be afraid to bid on some of these larger lots. I mean, as I say, the majority of the time, most of the stamps are going to turn out to be fake. But I have yet to buy a lot of a contentious area and find that there wasn't at least one genuine stamp. There almost always is. And oftentimes, those 1 or 2 genuine stamps, particularly if you happen to get them in good condition, will more than pay for the lot that you bought as forgeries. So, it's a very good way to build a collection if you are knowledgeable and you go around looking for the information, because most of the time the material you're bidding on will be underpriced or hit because of that. Now that'll only be the case usually where it's known to be forgeries, but that's most of the instances. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.